All right, but then I'm going to go ahead and get started. So again, hopefully you can all see this is AI in action, everyday tools and prompts. This is informally the second class. There is a sort of an AI introduction, but it's really just about like the more broader picture of what AI is, kind of some history, some vocabulary, some of the potential longer term impacts and ethics of it. So this is more of a hands-on, everyday, what do we do with this AI now that we have it kind of a class. So to jump into it, let's go forward. We sort of did the intros offline there, which is great. I'm going to start by doing a bit of a recap of that first intro class, and then we'll talk about the different tools that are available and kind of the pros and cons of them. And then we'll get into a big chunk that's really talking about the different ways that you can do prompting and the important aspects of it. And then we'll talk about how you can integrate AI into your work day to day and do some demos where I will hop out of Keynote and show you some of the stuff on my screen. So we're bound to run into problems when that happens. I hope you're all ready for things to screw up. So before we begin, standard disclaimer here, I may misrepresent some information in order to simplify it or in ignorance, and please excuse that. The information in this class is dynamic like no other class I have ever taught. It is constantly changing. I did teach this class last week in person, and it has been updated since then. There's a lot going on in this area. So I encourage you to stay on top of it and keep taking the class, keep looking into it. But the other thing you can do is just embrace the uncertainty because it is such a very interesting and dynamic area to keep following up on. Feel free to jump in with questions anytime. So a quick recap, what is AI or what's involved with this new emerging tech? From last time, we talked a little bit about what a language model is, and essentially at its core, it is a probability distribution over a sequence of words. And so the way to think about this is what, based on the prompt or the question that's given to the model, what are the odds that the next word should be the, or the next word should be a, or the next word should be significant, or the next word should be tonsillitis. It's a very bizarre kind of solution. When you look at it that way, you can really think about the fact that it's very math related and very logical, and it's hard to keep that in mind when you prompt it with something and you get a response that feels humanistic. So this is sometimes a helpful way to think about this, is to basically a probability distribution over the use of words. When we have what's called a recurrent neural network and we have multiple layers of this kind of logic, we wind up with something that's called a large language model. And its applications include things like speech recognition and natural language generation, information retrieval. Generative AI kind of takes it to another level where it is able to generate text and images and other media in response to prompts. And it requires these sort of deep learning recurrent models in order to develop something that is really gives you meaningful responses. And so at this point, our common uses for that are OpenAI. You can see OpenAI's application in things like Bing Chat, Gemini from Google, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, etc. So prompts are the problem or request that's used to issue to the model, so the language that's used to try to get a specific type of response from the model. And then at this point, we are oftentimes, depending on the model, able to utilize additional documents like images, graphics, even videos, and depending on the model, it might also be able to search the internet to supplement the information that it responds with. Hallucinations are quote unquote confident responses from the AI that are not justified by training. So these are things that the AI has made up in an effort to respond in a way that it thinks you want to hear. Again, if you look at it as a this word should come after this word, it's a lot easier to understand how it can hallucinate. I do want to be clear that while we have a tendency to characterize or humanize the prompts or these models, when the model returns with something that's a hallucination, this is not a lie. There's no intention behind these mistakes, right? They're not trying to mislead you. I mean, it's possible that they're trying to mislead you if the prompt has been written in such a way to endorse that kind of response. But typically speaking, there is no fact checking. It's not explaining itself. It's not justifying itself. It's just generating text. It just runs programs. So bias is a really important aspect to think about, even if it's really just like keeping in the back of your mind when you're working with your AI. One major aspect is that AI responses favor English and Western culture and American ideals, mostly because that's what it's been trained on. So what you're getting is very representative of our country and our culture. One of the ways that this is important, and to that end, all of the biases that we have within our American culture, including racism and sexism, are well represented. There's efforts that have been made to try to work around those. We'll actually talk about some of those today. I'm guessing some of you may have seen the news stories about Gemini, but despite the efforts, that bias is going to exist no matter what, because it exists in us. So there are multiple tools that have tried to, the ability of these tools to be freely available. Granted, maybe not the best tools are freely available, but there's basic tools that are freely available. And so to that end, there's become an amount of democratization available by using AI, which is nice. That said, it's not perfect. The best tools still require money. And there are other challenges with respect to geopolitics, to financial restraints, to availability of the internet in general, and then thereby the AI hardware and infrastructure, and then just general tech literacy, or actually really in the case of AI, literacy in general, right? Like you do have to be able to speak. Or speak or construct a sentence, which apparently I can't do, in order to communicate with the AI and to get reasonable responses from the model. I will say that as the models continue to get better, the requirement or the skill of the user is less important. And this will continue to change as the models get better and better at generating content. So why should we bother with AI? Like, if it has all these bad sides, what's good about it? There's been a number of documented reports and studies that show that using AI can significantly boost the quality and quantity of your work. So tasks are going to be completed more quickly. There are going to be more content overall. That content is going to be better. People who use AI are finding that in general, using a prompt in a large language model is giving you 158% more efficient response than what you get from Google. So if you're looking for information, you type it into Google, you're going to get much more useful information out of doing that same prompt in a large language model versus in Google, for a number of reasons. And because of these things, AI tools have the effect of narrowing the gap between lower and higher skilled workers. So again, like I said, there's, you must be this tall to ride this ride. But that even is coming down. And so the ability to write a great prompt is important, but where lots of people were freaking out about the new job being prompt engineers last year, that's not really going to be the thing. We all have this ability in us. We are all superheroes. So let's talk about the tools that make us awesome. This is a graph, the chart table. As you can see, that has a bunch of the, kind of high profile language models. The first one in here is ChatGPT Plus, which is GPT-4. It is kind of the top of the mountain, so to speak, with respect to models at this point. The GPT-4 models are the best performing models that we have. Last month, I think it was earlier this month, Google released Gemini, which is their version of a GPT-4 model. And it is performing similarly with GPT-4 with some other caveats. One thing that I will mention with respect to Gemini is that it has a much larger context window than any previous model up to this point. Prior to Gemini, the largest context window belonged to Claude, and that allowed for 200,000 tokens. By contrast, Gemini has a context window of 1 million tokens. So it's approximately 5 times larger. What does that mean? That means that in order that it can basically give access to 5 times as much information locally when it is sharing or responding to your messages. So it can save up to your past conversations up to 5 times longer. So if you want to reference something that you put in the past, it's going to have a longer sort of, so to speak, memory of conversations that you've had. It also allows you to provide more information. So you can either upload more images or you can upload video. You could upload video with some of these other tools, but not very much video. So the context window is giving lots more information to what can be used for the prompts that you're doing. Heather, did you have a question? Okay. So that's Gemini and GPT-4 are kind of like the top of the field. We'll talk some about cost in a little bit. Again, both of these are similar in that they allow you to upload images and video. They both connect to the internet, so they can supplement the information that they're providing with up-to-date information from the internet. Some of these other tools are Claude, which is a good model. It's a 3.5 plus model. It does have a large memory, granted not as large as Gemini now. Grok is the AI tool that is created by Elon Musk. It is not connected to the internet, but it does supplement responses with information content from Twitter or X. And then there's some other tools here like Pi, which we'll talk a little bit about as we go. I'm doing a bad job of getting us done within an hour, so I'm going to try and speed it along a little bit. We've talked some here about what's so great about these, so I'm going to kind of skip over this one. It is possible to use GPT-4 through Bing if you don't want to pay the $20 a month for a GPT-4 subscription, but you kind of want to see what's involved. This is an outlier sort of situation, and you can see it in the slides later. So I'm also going to skip over this scenario. But if the question for you is which one of these tools should I be using, it really at this point comes down to a choice between GPT-4 and Gemini if you want to be using one of the better class 4 models that are out there. So GPT-4 is available through ChatGPT Plus subscription at $20 a month. Gemini is available for free, as John mentioned, for 2 months, and then it's $20 a month. The challenges here a little bit are that it's a lot easier to get access to Gemini if you're just using your regular Gmail account. So as John has already done, you can go in and sign up, you get the 2-month free trial, and then you can choose to continue using it for $20 a month. It is actually possible to turn on Gemini in a Google Workspace account. This is new from my last class. I did not realize that this was possible. The cost there is also $20 a month if you sign up for a year's subscription. So technically, it's actually a little bit more expensive to do this for Google Workspace users. And it's also, there is no free 2-month trial as part of this process. So if you're doing it, you're upfront on the hook for $20 a month for a year. That granted does come with some extra storage in your Google Apps. So there are some other benefits with it, but there's also some cost, and you can use Gemini for free, and that might be easier for you. Some of the other options, again, Claude is $20 a month. If you're sensing a theme here, you're pretty much in for $20 a month if you want to have access to a quality large language model. Pi is a tool that is attempting to be a customization where it responds with a certain tone. It's very friendly. It's more day-to-day kind of casual circumstances. It wants to be your friend. Grok is kind of a sarcastic attempt, and we'll demo that in just a second. There's actually a second Grok AI tool, GROQ. It is trying to differentiate itself by being the fastest model. So if you test that out, it's really trying to return a response, not necessarily as quality of a response, but a very, very quick response. So there's some of the trade-offs. And then you can also get access to open source models like Llama 2 from Meta. And then there's a few other here that you can get in either run yourself or one through other. So just quickly here, this is a side by side of what you might, and you can read through it yourself. It's pretty sarcastic, kind of, I'm not thinking of the right terms here, but a little bitter. On the right, you'll see the I, and these are some of the use cases that I is recommending. So I need a safe for a conversation. I want to practice the conversation. I want relationship advice. So unlike most prompts or ideas that you're going to see from Google or these other tools, Pi has really come with a much more casual and more personable kind of act, which is still valid. 1 second, let me try to get my network improved. Okay. Let's see, where are we? Next up. The key here is, especially as these models get better and better, you're unlikely to notice the difference between these different models. Especially as they get better and better, it's more likely that your decision for choosing one model over another is going to be something like you really appreciate Elon Musk's humor, or you really want to have a more casual interface with your AI, or you really need it to be cutting edge, and so you want to use like a GPT-4 kind of solution. So as these continue to differentiate themselves, like many other services or industries that have some, you're going to find that the features the bigger deal in terms of which one of these tools you choose. Next up, do I have to spend money to use AI? Guessing already, but the answer is probably yes. It depends where you want to be on this range of different types of things you want to use AI for. Things that might cost money. If you're using a specific application that supports AI, that provides AI services, that's probably going to cost money. If you're looking at a subscription-based tool or access to some of these higher 4 and above models, that's going to cost money. If you're looking to integrate AI into your productivity tools, like I talked about, Gemini is charging money for me to integrate AI into the Google Workspace. There's Zapier uses so it has some functionality for access to AI, but it also charges if you have any supplemental data that I model, so there's a cost there. And then anything that's more sophisticated, even if it's just a matter of paying your team to do the work or paying a vendor to do the work for you, building anything that's going to be, custom to your organization with your own content and your own knowledge and learning is going to obviously have some overhead to it. So there is going to be a cost. All right, let's run through some prompts. First of all, nothing here is rocket science. I've heard all of you speak, and I know that you can all do that, and so you're going to be successful here today. Good job, everyone. Prompt engineering does make inherent sense. You just kind of need to follow through what is needed. The skill is knowing how to achieve a specific goal. The more specific you can be with respect to the goal that you're trying to achieve, the better the relief. There's fundamentally 2 kinds of AI that you're going to work with. One is a conversational AI, which is with like a ChatGPT where you type in that prompt. And then the other is more of a structured AI where you're using a tool that is managing the AI for you. So with a conversational one, it tends to be much more dynamic. You can fine tune your content. You can follow up with more questions or add more things. It typically involves many prompts, usually shorter prompts. Something that's structured is probably either putting that kind of prompt in there for you, or maybe the type of prompting that you're doing is related more to the settings or the configuration that you have. And it typically has just like a basic prompt, single prompt behind it that you may not even have any control over. The trick is that a lot of times you might tool that overlaps these in some ways. And we'll talk about some of what those might be. The effort to build that kind of like larger context, you're going to find lots of terminology throughout the world in terms of people trying to suggest ways to construct a prompt. Some people use like terms like justification or focusing on the situation or expertise. Obviously, in a more academic settings, there's discussion about pedagogy and things like that. I've kind of honed it in on this series of 7 things that are going to go into your prompt. Some of them are more important than others. The most important really is task. You really don't have much of a prompt if you don't have a task. I mean, you can say, you can give an example of something, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. That can be possible, but really at its core, the first part of your prompt is going to be, hey, model, I need something. Here's what I want. The second one and third one that are not mandatory, but are very important to your success are going to be the context and the exemplar. And we'll talk about both of those in just a minute. And then the other ones that are nice to have, but not as critical, are things like your persona, the format of your output, the tone, which is different from the persona, and then motivate. So let's break those down. Obviously, key objective. It's a good idea to include an action verb. So you're telling the model to write or create, consider, or develop or provide, some other action. And it's possible to put together several of these tasks into one prompt. So do this and then do that, or do this and do this. It's possible to put these together. So here's a prompt: create a list of great books. Oh, Des, you're going to love this, by the way. There's a lot going on here. So here's my my prompt delivered to ChatGPT: create a list of great books. ChatGPT is like, that's a big ask. There's a lot of books out there, but it's going to come back with a couple here: To Kill a Mockingbird, 1984, Pride and Prejudice. I think we can all agree those are objectively very good books. But let's say we want to do a little bit more with this. In this case, we're going to use context to limit the scope of what we're asking for. It can provide background, define success more specifically, or an area of interest. So now I'm going to put in a prompt that is create a list of great science fiction books. Or specifically create a list of great science fiction books under 200 pages. I'm going to mention this a couple of times, but large language models are great at giving you tons of content. I mean, if you think about it, that's kind of what they're designed to do. They don't really edit themselves particularly well. So you may very well find that a repeating theme to your prompts is, let me stop you right there. Let me limit how much you're giving back to me. In this case, I'm trying to keep the limit to the books, but I wanted to mention that because I almost mentioned it on the last slide. A lot of times when you see these prompts here, they're cut off because I cannot include the entirety of what prompt the prompt returned for me. So in this case, ChatGPT has come back with, I think gave me 10, but here are the top 4 sci-fi books under 200 pages that it recommended for me. So Time Machine, The Lathe of Heaven. I'm pretty sure that's under 200 pages because otherwise it would have recommended other Ursula Le Guin. We and the Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Again, pretty good, objectively. What we might have more success with is something like exemplars. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how exemplars are applied in a little bit with this 0-shot and few-shot prompting. But the idea is that by providing some examples, we can get a response from the model that is more helpful to us, or more targeted to what we're looking for. So, for example, in this case, I'm going to use some exemplars to try to get output in a really specific format. So list popular sci-fi books by their authors. I have in quotes the name of the book, and then I have added to that the author after that. And you can see here, I've done that for the first 2. I've left the author off of the third one. And when I submit this, ChatGPT is smart enough to see where I'm going. And so it gives me the third author, Ursula Le Guin, and then continues with another 7 recommendations in that same format of title and author. And again, I think that we're in pretty good territory here where these are all very good sci-fi books. Persona. So now persona is is going to be a way that you can define the response that you receive by trying to give it a specific characteristic. So you can say, I want you to write this response from the persona of, a journalism expert or an author, a successful author. You can even use a persona that's a real person. So you can say, hey, I want a list of the best songs in the last 20 years from the pretend that you're Taylor Swift, right? Okay, and so maybe you get all Taylor Swift songs. I don't know. Maybe not, but this is not the same thing as tone. So tone is really going to be much more about the type of response. Is it more polite? Is it more effective? Is it easier to understand, more complex? The tone might be impacted by the persona, but your persona doesn't have to be a specific person. It doesn't have to relate to the tone. So an example here might be, let's pretend I'm a 15-year-old girl who likes robots. Create a list of great sci-fi books for me. So now we're going to try to get output that is really targeted to, in this case, the audience. But again, you can come at it from a different side. I'm Stephen Hawking, recommend 5 sci-fi books for me. So that's a more specific targeted response. In this case, ChatGPT thinks that Stephen Hawking has more scientific, an individual with the intellect and scientific insight of Stephen Hawking. You might appreciate more complex scientific concepts. And so it's giving us the 3-body problem, Hyperion, and Blindsight. So not too shabby. If you want to know what good books there are to read out there in sci-fi that are a little bit more advanced, that might be a prompt that works for you. All right, format is really more about what do you want that prompt to return to you with respect to the content organization. And so this might be something as simple as return this in a list. ChatGPT already loves to return things in a list, so I'm not sure that you have to say that, but it can be useful. You could also do something like, I want this in a table. I want this to be code. Like, I want to do X, Y, and Z, but return this to me in PHP, or a poem or a limerick. I'm sure you've all seen examples of large language models giving you dirty limericks. Or if you haven't, you should look into that. So here's an example of provide a list of the best sci-fi books in a table, not the tape, with columns for title, author, year of publication, and a brief description. And so this is what I get. I will mention that I said brief description. Usually the model doesn't care that I said brief, but I think in this case, putting it in a table forced it to be actually brief. And so here you can see the output is, this title, column, author column, year, and then the description. And it's pretty decent. This is good. I can copy and paste this, put it anywhere. Let's go. Tone, again, here, this is going to be something that is independent of a persona. So this is more like how you want that response to read. How's the professionalism? Is it humorous, or does it think it's humorous? Brevity is an important piece here. So, for example, provide a brief humorous recap of Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke without spoilers. I didn't want to do this demo for you all and then ruin Childhood's End for anyone who hasn't read it yet, because it's a great book. So I'm not gonna, well, I'll read a little bit here. The overlords are pretty chill for alien overlords. Spoiler alert, there's alien overlords. They're not into conquering or making a mess. Instead, they're all about ending wars, cleaning up our planet, and basically giving humanity a cosmic timeout to think about what we've been doing. It's great. Okay. It's slightly humorous. I mean, I'm not laughing out loud, but I get it. And then finally, and this is one that I've added that you may or may not see if you're searching around for these kind of what makes up a prompt. And this is motivation. And specifically, it has been found from various studies that addressing the AI directly and sort of applying humanistic characteristics are more successful, is a more successful strategy. So using motivational language, applying a personal appeal, or specific direction can support better outcomes. So something like, you're very good at witty insights delivered in short blurbs. Please provide a brief, humorous, you'll note there that I used caps, recap of Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke without spoilers. So now I've got this recap. I will say, I think it's more than just this one paragraph, but I did try to say brief. and it was fairly successful there. And it still thinks it's pretty funny. Arthur C. Clarke, childhood's end is like if you're strict yet surprisingly benevolent high school principal. Okay. Now the real power, of course, is in being all or as many as you need of a single prompt. So in this case, I'm creating a prompt that uses a lot of these things, and you've sort of seen me develop to this. You're very good at witty, insightful insights delivered in short blurbs. Please provide a humorous 1 to 2 sentence description of 5 science fiction books you think Stephen Hawking would like. Provide the descriptions in a table with columns for the name, author, and description, and a column that shows the number of stars the book has on Goodreads. So now we're even taking it to the next level where we're making sure that we're utilizing our model by reaching out for the latest information. We're making it go out to the internet and find these ratings on Goodreads. This will take some time. So here's what I get back. I'm back again to some of these more complex books, The Three-Body Problem, because these are for Stephen Hawking. It has the author, it has these brief descriptions. There's somewhat humorous in here, and then the Goodreads rating in that final column. So that took a little bit of time to get to the point of knowing how to write that. But once you did that, the output here is obviously really useful, and putting this together yourself would certainly take a lot longer. So obviously, big benefits there. Any questions so far? Did everybody go to sleep?
There's nothing in the chat, Jen, but we can hear you loud and clear.
Great, thank you. So we'll take just a moment and look at this few shot versus zero shot prompting. So the few shot is something that gives a couple of examples like we saw with the title and then the author after it, to sort of demo what we want the output to, how we either want it to work or what we want it to look like, a few other options there. It's possible to be successful with a zero shot, so like immediately describing what you want, but not really using exemplars, but with a dose of motivation. So you're a really good curator. Please make me a list of popular sci-fi books and their authors. So here I didn't bother putting in that format of the title and the author, but I said you're really good at this. So let's see what we get versus this other list popular sci-fi books and their authors. And then chain of thought prompting is when we have a structure to few shot prompting that takes a couple of successive steps to sort of facilitate several pieces of action in a more complex response or request. So here are some of these exemplars. Like in this case, it's a long example, but we're trying to get the model to do this math problem in a really specific way. I will say, for the purposes of this, you may have read about this, but large language models are getting smarter and better all the time. But at this point, the place where they still lag behind humans the most is in math and in the application of mathematics. And so things like this, where there's an order of operations, are something that really trips up language models. So in this case, the use of a few shot prompt or a prompt that has an example is something that could help it be more successful. So if you say, I went to the bookstore and I bought 3 sci-fi books, 2 biographies, 2 magazines, and then here's the cost of each. And in my answer that I provide to it, I say, here's how you do this. The 3 sci-fi books at $16 each come to $48. The 2 biographies at $22 each come to $44. If I add all these together, here is the answer. And then if I follow up with another question that is in the same sort of format, I'm much more likely to see success. I will say that I've run this in both like a chat GPT and then also in my own AI, like local AI. And it is really interesting how bad AI can be at math. I think we are very used to understanding how math works instinctively, and it's kind of almost wondrous to see it fail so significantly when it's really good at other things when it comes to math. So another thing that you might use are prompt templates, and these are often referred to as recipes as well. So this is a routine structure that you might use, and then you can save it somewhere, and there's a number of tools we'll talk about in a little bit for where you can save these. And then you can have something like this, brackets placeholder text where you can just highlight these pieces and put them in with the things that you need to do testing for, or sorry, that you need it to use this prompt for. So this is a really maybe not even as helpful, because when you fill in persona, that might be kind of a longer description. But let's just say your persona, pretend you are Taylor Swift, review the contents below and come up with 5 questions that, and then like the your listeners might have, and then you provide, I don't know, like the latest album or something, right? Like, so you can start to use this in different contexts. That was a bad one, bad example. Don't use that one, but one of the other great things that you can use AI for is alternative approaches to something. So we are very used to seeing things in our own default way, but models are really good at coming up with other ideas. It has millions of ideas in it that's been seeded with ideas. So going to a model and, if you have a prompt and you're not sure if it's any good, you can take that prompt and return it to the same model that you're in, or take it to a different model and say, hey, this is my prompt. Can you give me some ideas about how else I could generate this? So one of the things that I have in my GPT, chat GPT, there's a place to put instructions that go with every one of your prompts. So one of the things that I like to do is add to it, whenever I ask you to complete a task, list what the task is, list some alternative approaches for completing that task, and then write a prompt for yourself based on each approach, and then ask me which one I should use. Now, this is a more complex prompt, obviously, because I'm saying, here's a couple of things you need to do. You need to list what the prompt is so that we're all clear on what that is, and I know that you're following me. And then write this prompt for each of these different approaches, and then ask me which one I should use. So again, there's a few steps involved here, but it's providing these within a single prompt. This I sort of talked about already, where you can prompt the model to review its own response. So you can, again, say, hey, you just gave me this response, go back through it and like, tell me if it's really true, and maybe come back and give me some links to reference what this is. Or likewise, you can take that response and put it in another model and say, is this really true? So objectively review your response and offer some suggestions about how it could be reviewed if you just even want to start with a better response, or generate a series of facts contained in that previous output. And then let's go back and make sure that those are all correct. So this is a way of helping you to troubleshoot if you're not sure if the model is hallucinating, or if you're working on some content that's really like vitally important that it be accurate. This can be some ways to help you make sure that it is. All right, fun with fact checking. This is a good example of a template that you can use, where you would say, when I say 5 facts something, and then obviously the something is the placeholder, I would like you to provide 5 facts on the something, and at the end, give me recommendations for other resources. So this is one that I've certainly used before and that I have like a placeholder for, so that if I'm curious about something, if I don't know what something means fundamentally, I can just put in 5 facts something, right? And then it's going to come back and give me these foundational pieces of information, and ideally also, very importantly, the resources that they got those from, so that I can go back and either look into it more if I'm interested, or check on the veracity of those statements. Prompt chaining, we sort of talked a little bit about the chain of thought prompting, and this is kind of the next level of it, where you may have, you saw me do a prompt where I wanted it to do several things from that prompt, but you can also prompt it to prompt you about how to handle next steps. So the example here is, let's create a newsletter. Each newsletter needs a main topic, a related event, a type of tool or service to talk about, and a statistic. We're going to come up with a list of topics, and then the event, tool, service, and statistics related to each topic. So we're going to start here by generating these 10 topics, and then there's going to be a follow-up where I say, hey, I liked the idea for topic number 4. Let's continue and get the topic, the related event, the tool, and service for that. So if you're somebody who has to generate content, let's say for social media or for a newsletter, this is something that can really help you with idea generation, and then also finding the resources that you need to put into the article or into the newsletter. All right, so the use cases of AI are some of the biggest challenges about how to use AI. We're all new to it. This is no one should feel bad about this, but it can be very difficult to think about when to use AI. And the answer is, if you're not sure about what you should be doing, go make the AI do it. So whenever you can, think about how to add prompting to the end of your responses with useful next steps. So if you're not sure what comes after that, fill it in with that default thing that says at the end of each prompt, suggest what my next prompt should be or what else I might look up, right? So then that can automatically fill that in. So this would be at the end of every response, end with a suggestion for another prompt or a better way to write my original prompt. So that's another way of doing it, is to say, you made up this prompt, but it's actually kind of crappy. Why don't you try it again with this, and let's see if we get a better response. I promised to talk more about the motivation piece, which is that seventh aspect of constructing a prompt. And again, there's been a lot of studies, and they've shown that using polite language, words like please and thank you, using caps, and being polite across various languages result in more success. They result typically in longer responses and more complete responses. If you're rude, the results, it doesn't make it more likely that the responses are a hallucination or a lie or anything like that, because again, there's no motivation behind the hallucinations. But it does mean that your responses are probably going to be shorter, less inclusive. They're just not going to be as quality a response. And then, yeah, things like using caps. This sounds weird, but it makes sense. Because these models have been trained on language, and in general, we tend to try to be polite, hopefully, as humans, mostly. And we have better success when that happens. Caps are a almost universal way of emphasizing things, and the model, no surprise, has picked up on that, meaning that something's important. So an example of a prompt that has shown tremendous success is, please take a deep breath and work on the problem step by step. And then let's all pause for a moment and say, like, who would have thought that that would be a successful prompt for a machine? It's not breathing. It's not doing anything step by step, except for maybe deciding which word comes next, right? It really is kind of shocking that that works, but there's a number of papers on this, including the one that's included at the bottom of this, and several others in the resources that I'm going to share at the end. Just remember, they're not human. Even though you're being asked to speak to them like they are human, please remember that they are not. So one of the biggest challenges, I think, of utilizing AI is just this failure of imagination. So either not thinking about how to use it, or not remembering to use it when it's useful, or not having this necessarily an imagination on how best to take advantage of it or how best to talk to it. So some of the use cases that I wanted to sort of highlight here: reorganizing content. It's really just so good at reviewing large quantities of information, like in a way that we are not, right? We are natural skimmers, and we are going to miss out on things, and you're going to have much more success for filtering or extracting or summarizing information. Likewise, remove, replace, reformat content is going to be much more successful with the AI. It's going to go much faster than any human can do it already. Getting expert advice within reason. Again, please do not go and talk to your GPT instead of your doctor, or diagnose your hernia with that. It's great for and getting better all the time for generating images, presentations, chart, etc. Keeping in mind, of course, that these models are also being used to generate disinformation and fake deepfakes. Very good for content idea generation. This is actually one of the scenarios of kind of, if you have a million monkeys in a room, someone's going to write Shakespeare. Yeah, it's kind of like that. There's a lot of monkeys that have trained these GPTs. So learning about a topic or trying something new, it's very good for prompting new things. You can do that with games or flashcards. The GPTs can, when prompted successfully, come up with really fun ways for you to learn new things. I'm going to highlight this as well, because this is the context window expanding, like we've seen for Gemini, has a lot of potential impacts that I think we haven't necessarily thought about. So this is, I don't know if it's going to work. There we go. So that's a 7-second video. And that video was uploaded to Gemini and then prompted with, give me an array, a JSON array of the books in this video. Now, that didn't work right out of the box, but they were able to follow up on that and say, give me a list of the books you saw in this video. And the GPT was able to do that. And then the next prompt after that was turn this into a JSON format. So you can see where the, in the past with 200,000 tokens, you might have been able to get a 7-second video, but it would have been tight. Now that we have 1 million tokens, and Gemini has already said, Google's already said that they're within striking distance of upgrading that to 10 million tokens. The amount of data that can be used, that you can provide to the AI in order to return some useful action is tremendous. So I thought that was a great example of what's going on. Yes, Heather, the slideshow will be shared. Oh, okay. And then there's the JSON output of all the books that were in that, and you can go back through that and find them. I mean, obviously you want to go back through and make sure that it's correct, that they got the author. In some of those cases, it's scanning across it. You don't even have like a single frame that you can look at. So it's really very impressive how well it did at pulling that list together. I am definitely going to run out of time, but let me power through this. So what does everyday AI look like for you? One of the key ways that it's beneficial is, again, with better search. I'm going to definitely have an SEO class at some point here because search has been changed so monumentally by AI. For many of us, we're still using Google, and that will continue for a while, but it's gonna, the way that we do search is going to change tremendously. More efficient tasks, processes, and automation. There's lots of tools to save time in these areas. And then supplemental support with things like writing and editing, brainstorming. Even if you're still writing things, which is something that I still do, I hear a lot from people that they appreciate the process of writing because it helps them to really absorb the information, and that's great. But you'll do it for a different reason than maybe you had to before, or at a minimum you're using it to supplement. You're able to use AI to supplement that. Client-facing tools and support, if you're willing to invest in that for your business or for your team. And then for more of a curated knowledge base, and again, this is going to be something that's going to get easier as that context window grows, to sort of train knowledge bases that are either internally facing or, again, with caveats, externally facing. So the ways that you're going to work through this, and I kind of talked about this before, is you could use apply a task and apply it to an application. So you might do this for a notes or a transcription tool or for coding support. This is Copilot for Microsoft tools. So Microsoft 365 uses Copilot for integration with AI, and Google is using Gemini. And then the interactive tools like chatbots and GPTs. And then these interactive areas are where things like these prompting is going to be important. And to that end, support with prompting. So saving your prompts, sharing your prompts, those are things that are going to be important. This is totally a sidebar, but right now, the usability or the user interface of AI tools is not great. Des, if you ever get your voice back, I'd love to chat with you about this, but it's any of these tools, Gemini, ChatGPT, the most you're going to get with respect to a supportive user interface is some ideas about what you might want to prompt with. And these ideas are not even curated by anything logical. Like, I mean, this is Google. Google could know what I'm browsing in my browser and come back with maybe some curated prompts based on, what I've been doing in my machine or in my browser. It's not doing that. There's nothing sophisticated here about these. I will say that Gemini is a little bit better in terms of when you do a prompt, there's a little more ability to tweak the prompt that you wrote with the tools as opposed to having to edit it and rewrite it, GPT is really not putting a ton of time into that interface piece. So when you don't have that good interface, some of the things that might help with that are to use some websites or browser extensions that offer access to other models or allow them to work with that interaction. So there's some tools that will allow you to save prompts, which I will show you if you're able to stick around, and share some of those prompts, or make direct content edits and ask questions about content. So these prompt libraries basically are repositories for organizing and sharing prompts. A prompt library obviously gives you efficiency. You don't have to memorize all these prompts. You don't have to retype them. There's an improved experience and reliability. You're much more likely to get routine. Your prompt is going to be different every time, to be clear. If you type the same prompt in today and tomorrow, today and 5 minutes later, they're going to be different every time. There is no repeating a prompt because it's really, again, just about that probability of the next word that comes. But you're still going to have enhanced accuracy and more consistent responses. So especially if you have a more targeted prompt, let's say you want to use that with your team, you want to provide a persona or be really clear about a tone so that your entire organization is getting the same kind of content out of the model. So with AI for your business, you want to be thinking about these things, about sharing prompts so that you can reuse them. You want to be thinking about the different chatbot tools and also considering the costs involved there. They can be very helpful for things like troubleshooting basic issues and for some simple steps that can be automated by the AI. But you also really want to be considerate of where that information is going and the information that's being used to train the model for your business. So one of the great examples was recently there was a ruling that said that that Air Canada had to follow up on the refund policy that its AI hallucinated to a customer. A customer had asked a question about a refund, and the model said, here's our refund policy, but it made it up. There was no foundation to it. The courts ruled that Air Canada has to provide that policy because it had a tool that it endorsed that it said offered that policy. So these are the kinds of things, obviously, that you need to be really well aware of. And particularly if you are in an industry or with a company that deals with private data like HIPAA or FERPA, you need to be really comfortable with making sure that whatever information is going out or coming into that model is secure. So there's a few tools that can help with this. These are low-level, not secure tools. Okay, if you want to go the security route, there's going to be a lot more involved, including a lot more money. But both Zapier and GPTs, which are part of OpenAI, are available to collect information and return it based on prompts that you provide and proprietary information or resources that you provide. Both cost $20 a month to start, and it's. I would say if you only have $20 to use and you want to play with this, definitely go with ChatGPT. All right. I am officially out of time. And so apologies to everybody. When I teach this class in person, I made it an hour and a half, but I thought I could get it done in an hour, but I was wrong. If anybody is able to stick around, I'm going to go ahead and demo some stuff, but I totally understand if you need to go.
I'm staying.
Cool.
I'm retired.
You're retired, right? Yeah, who cares? All right, I'm going to stop sharing that and start sharing my monitor, or sorry, my Chrome window. Feel free to put faces back on here because I do love to see the awe and wonder when I show you something amazing. Thank you, Heather. That's excellent. All right, can everybody see introducing GPTs? Yes, cool. So how many of you have played with GPTs? Anybody? John has, okay. Stefan has a little. So the GPTs are available if you are paying for ChatGPT. So if you're in the $20 a month subscription, And they allow you to customize like a GPT interaction. I know I'm logged in, please do not. Yeah, they allow you to customize an interaction. So in this case, I've made one that provides AI advice for small businesses and teams. And so in order to do that, go to that. Oh, no, that's not. I've given it a name, and to be fair, GPT like walks you through all these steps. It really facilitates this. It'll generate the image for you. It's great. And then you can give it a description, and your instructions are basically a really elaborate prompt, right? So, and this can be added onto over time. So you're gonna be able to adjust it, test it out over here on the right, and then modify it as you need to. In this case, I've given it some instructions for what I want this GPT to be able to do. I've supplemented that with a couple of websites that I want it to use for providing advice on the format of prompts. I've specifically said this is a resource from my company, so mention that for like full disclosure. Down here, I'm able to specify the conversation starters is what they call them. So that's what these 4 windows, these 4 blocks are to start with, to kind of give it some context again for like the kind of information that we're going to provide it. And then I have some other knowledge, supplemental knowledge here. In this case, it's actually just the slides from my first class and this class, which I need to update because they keep changing. So I will say that again, while Gemini is up to 1 million tokens, I know that ChatGPT has recently raised its context window as well. So I think that I'm able to reference more files now, and that's something I need to double check on. Zapier, at least for now, only allows you to use one supporting document, which is really a bummer, not only because I have 2 here, obviously, but also I just feel like it's really restrictive. And then down here, you can specify the capabilities of your model. Specifically, do you allow web browsing to supplement the information, which obviously I do because I put a URL in there. And then are you okay with it in interpreting code? I left image generation off. That's not the intent of this GPT. If I wanted to, I could come in here and connect to an API or do some other references. I haven't done that with this one. I've done it with another one, but that's not for today. And then there's a couple of other settings that you can do here, like allow this information to go back to ChatGPT. So what that gives me is this small business advisor, and I can come in here and ask it questions, and hopefully that's useful. One thing I will say that it doesn't do a very good job of that I've seen is provide any information about the use of my GPT. There is no analytics or tracking that I've found here. Zapier will at least, and I will say this is also very punitive of it. It will tell you how many people have used it in like the last 30 days, I believe. But there's no such option available with GPT. So if that's something that's important to you, it's not available. So this is what ChatGPT looks like. Again, this is my small business advisor, but if I just do a general prompt, it will give me a few options for how I might use this. Because I pay for ChatGPT, it defaults to 4, but I can also come back in here and jump back to 3.5. I will say that if you're in a hurry and it doesn't matter as much for you, 3.5 is much faster. And again, this is something that's going to continue to improve over time, but that's kind of where we are. Whoops, I just closed that. The other one that I wanted to demo is Gemini. So Gemini came out rather recently from Google. Google is not new to AI. They've been developing their AI capabilities for a long time. And quite frankly, a lot of people thought that they were going to come out with stuff a lot sooner. Their previous version was Bard. So you may have heard conversations about Google's AI, and that context, you probably heard it talked about as Bard. Google has bailed on Bard in part because they didn't do a great job of putting it out there. They got it out in March, so about 4 months after GPT was released. And it was not as successful overall. That being said, it was always freely available. There's no charge version for that, or there wasn't for Bard. There is now for Gemini. Unfortunately, Gemini, in my experience so far, has not been as good in some cases. John sent me a question actually after our class last week, and Gemini, in a particular scenario that I won't really get into, definitely performed the worst of the models that we tested, and gave us, frankly, incorrect information. It just didn't like read the page that we were referring to very well. But again, I mentioned this before, it's a little bit better in terms of some of what it gives you here. So like, I can double check this response by clicking on this button, and it will Google search it for me and come back with references. So that's a nice, easy way. And more than that, I really appreciate the ethos of it documenting itself, right? Like that's a really good, I feel like, step for an AI to take. There's some other options. Oh, that was just that one. Where, let me do another search here. Yeah, see, this is where the challenge comes in. I can't think of what to search. Oh, great. All right, well, let's try that again. Gemini. Good morning. Okay. Boy, you are dropping the ball here, Gemini. Okay, try that again. The Thursday. Thanks. All right, yeah, here we go. So among the other options available in Gemini here that you won't see in other places, this is going to show you what your response might have looked like. So this was a very simple prompt. There's not that many different ways it can do it. So these are more or less all the same, but you can regenerate it and maybe get a different response, especially for some of the longer, more complex ones that might be useful. ChatGPT, when you do a prompt, see what happens here. It gives you the ability to classify something as a bad response, and it will ask you why it's bad, like what it did wrong. But Gemini actually gives you the ability to say both this is a good or a bad response, or to modify the response. So if you wind up with something that is really long and you need to shorten it, or you need the language to be a little more casual or simpler, there's some quick actions that you can do here. And then it also lets you share your response. So if somebody, like if you did this on behalf of somebody else, like for example, when I tested it out for John, I can share that with him. That being said, in my experience, this doesn't always work. A lot of people have talked about problems with Gemini. You may have heard that there were some prompts that were done in Gemini, and apparently Gemini has been written to try to return much more diverse responses, which, while I appreciate the effort, in several cases have resulted in output that is inaccurately diverse. So like old photos of senators or photos of German soldiers that are, Japanese or women or different things like that, that are terribly inaccurate and in many cases offensive. And also in the case of like what I was trying to test with John, it just feels like they did not thoroughly test this before they put that out there. And again, Google's kind of been trailing behind GPT, OpenAI in this, and I think they're kind of scrambling, and it's sort of hurting the output. So I'm curious to see what everyone else's example is, or experiences with these.
And
yeah.
Did you want to mention that HARPA thing?
I'm going to.
Oh,
for sure. Yes, thank you. These are the training resources, and I am going to share these with you via email after the class. This is actually the combination training resources or resources for both the intro class and this class. So if you want to go back and see the slides and stuff from the first class, you can do that as well. And then there's a huge list of various tools, prompt resources, stories, people to follow. So there's a lot of stuff in here that if you're interested in this, is a deep dive. One other thing I will mention is that my colleague Sarah Egan-Warren and I do a monthly meetup where we chat about various articles or topics related to AI just over lunch. We just had the last one, but the next one I think is actually going to be pretty soon on March 14th, just because of scheduling. So if you're interested in that, please join us. I think we're going to talk about Gemini and how much it sucks. Sorry, I shouldn't say. And then I'm going to show you Harpa here. So Harpa is an extension that you can put, this is for Chrome, but I believe they have, maybe they just have Chrome, but there are other extensions that do something similar. And what this offers, let me just go to a website. I probably shouldn't go to my website because now I'm going to find something else, but okay. So this is an extension that will bring AI to any page wherever you are. So obviously I have it kind of pinned up here, so I can click on this, and when I do, it's going to pop open on the side over here. I have already put a lot of the kinds of prompts that I showed you in this class in here. So if I want to use a prompt, I can click on this little slash, or I can start to type it in if I remember what my prompt is named, and I can go through here and look for the prompts that are favorites or that I wrote myself. Those are user. So like, for example, I have a fact check prompt here. So if I need to fact check something, I can use this as a starter. I have a couple here, like rewriting an article or rewriting a press release. Reviewing and improving an article that I've written, because I do that sometimes. Here's the 5 facts one. So if I click on one of these, it's going to drop that in here. And so when I say 5 facts something, I would like 5 facts on something. And then depending again on the tool that I'm using, so I'm using GPT-4, but I'll show you more about that in a second. It will keep this in my context window and let me use it again. So the way I would use this is just to type this in to remind GPT that, sorry, I need to do this, to remind GPT that that's what I'm doing, because I haven't run this in a while, and so it's probably not in my context window anymore. So now if I want to use this again, I can just say variations. This is idea generation, sorry. Oh, 5 facts. Oh, see, that's nice. ChatGPT misunderstood what I said and is doing variations on something. This actually might have, because I did that too, and it might still have that in the context window. That's interesting. Okay, so yeah, you can see it's saying, I understand that if you do variations on something or 5 facts on something, I will give you those responses. So let's try variations, because I didn't actually tell it to do that. Variations on board games for the kids. I don't know what I'm going to get here. Let's all tune in. Well, it's giving me something. I don't know if these are real or if they're any good. I don't recognize any of them so far. I don't know. Maybe they just made all these up. I'll just save that for later. If this whole AI thing doesn't work out, I'll have a side gig creating games. So there's an example, or like 5 facts. Let's try 5 facts. Board games for kids. Oops, sorry, I should have stopped the other one. That's mad at me now. Okay, educational benefits. Can you all see this? Yeah, okay. The historical roots of board games. All right, this is in depth. This is going to go on for a while. I'm going to stop that. But there's a bunch of other ones in here that come with the AI tools. So rewrite, compose, TLDR something. The nice thing about this too is I can do like a TLDR this page. So I can just come in here and either highlight this text or summarize, like put in the URL for this web page. It should just do it when I'm on the page. So there are my key takeaways. So hopefully that's a good example of really like putting the extension into use. And it's also helpful. I mean, you don't probably want to have it open all the time, but this is a good way maybe to help get yourself to use AI more regularly just by having it over there and visible and reminding you that you can be doing that. So I'm just going to very briefly like say, yeah, done. There's a whole bunch of other options that are in here. So there's some SEO shortcuts, e-commerce, copywriting, learning. There is a section in here, inspirational quotes, just in case you need those. Bye, Heather. Somewhere in here is there's resume stuff. There's one in here, I think, that will write fake, I think it's in marketing, that will write fake reviews. So not great, but an actual use case. So these are, Harpa is just one of, you can imagine there's quite a few other tools that will do this. I like Harpa, it's well reviewed. I encourage you to do your own reviewing if you're interested, because it's very handy to have. Oh, I'm sorry. The one other thing I want to show you. This tool will work with open-ended, like, so you can get GPT 3.5 if you even just have an account with OpenAI. So you can be using that. But then if you're paying for GPT-4, you can connect this to your account so that it's using GPT-4 for your responses. Likewise, it's going to do the same thing for Gemini and for Claude. So if you have accounts with those, you can connect those. So you can make sure that this is using a GPT-4 model and the latest, best responses. And then you can just change them if you want to. So this is another thing I do is if I want to compare how the models are doing, I might shift between GPT-4 and Gemini or 3.5 or something like that. All right. I think that was everything that I had for today. Are there any questions? I'm going to stop recording.
There aren't any in the chat, Jen. I might be interested in some of your like personal prompts. I saw a couple that I thought would be good.